Remember that scene in Indiana Jones where the crystal skull hums with some strange, otherworldly power? That wasn't just Hollywood magic. It was inspired by a real-life mystery that's puzzled archaeologists, historians, and even scientists for over a century. These eerie, translucent artifacts, carved with uncanny precision, have fueled whispers of lost civilizations, extraterrestrial contact, and even supernatural forces. But here's the thing, no one can agree on where they truly came from. Some say they're ancient relics of Mesoamerican cultures, crafted by hands skilled beyond their time. Others insist they're elaborate hoaxes, designed to fool us into believing in a past that never was. And then there are those who think the truth might be something far stranger, something we're not even ready to accept. Picture this, a crystal skull, flawless in its symmetry, so perfectly carved that modern experts argue whether our own technology could even replicate it. How did artisans from centuries ago, without lasers or precision tools, create something so mesmerizing? The answer isn't just hidden in the shadows of history, it's buried beneath layers of myth, deception, and spine-tingling speculation. From the jungles of Central America to the private collections of eccentric millionaires, these skulls have traveled a path as mysterious as their origins. And every theory we uncover only pulls us deeper into the enigma. Were they sacred objects used by ancient priests to commune with the gods, or are they proof of knowledge lost to time, secrets we've yet to rediscover? This isn't just a story about artifacts gathering dust in museum cases. It's a detective story spanning continents and centuries, filled with characters straight out of an adventure novel, treasure hunters, con artists, scientists on the edge of a breakthrough. And the stakes, nothing less than rewriting what we think we know about human history. So if you've ever wondered how much of the past is still waiting to be uncovered, or whether some mysteries defy explanation altogether, you're about to embark on a journey that will challenge everything you assume is true. Because the crystal skulls aren't just objects, they're a riddle wrapped in legend, and solving it might just change how we see our place in the world. Ready to dig deeper? Let's start where every great mystery begins, with the first clue. The first crystal skulls emerged from the shadows of history in the late 1800s, surfacing under circumstances as murky as the artifacts themselves. At the center of this mystery stood Eugène Boban, a French antiquarian whose name became synonymous with these enigmatic relics. Boban, who claimed to have acquired the skulls during his travels in Mexico, presented them as genuine pre-Columbian masterpieces, objects crafted by the hands of Aztec or Maya artisans centuries before European contact. But here's where the plot thickens. Many of these skulls appeared suspiciously flawless, their surfaces polished to a degree that seemed impossible for ancient tools. Were they genuine archaeological finds or something far more deceptive? One of the most famous specimens, the Mitchell-Hedges skull, entered the spotlight in the early 1900s, wrapped in layers of intrigue. Discovered, or so the story goes, by adventurer F. Mitchell-Hedges' daughter during an expedition in Belize, this skull was said to have been found beneath the ruins of a Mayan temple. Its haunting realism and detachable jawbone made it a marvel, but skeptics quickly raised questions. Why were there no documented records of its excavation? And how could such a delicate object survive centuries buried in the jungle without a single scratch? Across the Atlantic, another skull took up residence in the British Museum, donated by none other than Tiffany and Company in 1898. Initial tests suggested it was ancient, but later examinations revealed tool marks inconsistent with pre-Columbian methods. The deeper researchers dug, the more contradictions emerged. Boban himself was eventually accused of trading in forgeries, his reputation tarnished by rumors that he'd commissioned skilled European artisans to create these ancient relics. Yet even with these doubts, the skulls held a strange power over those who encountered them: collectors, scholars, and even psychics who claimed the objects pulsed with energy. So what's the truth? Were these skulls crafted by a lost civilization with knowledge we've yet to understand? Or were they elaborate deceptions born from a 19th century obsession with the exotic? The line between fact and legend blurs with every turn in this story, leaving us with more questions than answers. And perhaps that's exactly what makes the crystal skulls so enduringly fascinating. They refuse to surrender their secrets easily. The crystal skulls shimmer with an almost unnatural perfection, their surfaces so smooth they seem to defy the passage of time. Carved from single blocks of quartz, sometimes clear as ice, other times cloudy like ancient mist, these artifacts range in size from small, palm-sized curios to life-sized replicas that stare back at you with hollow, knowing eyes. But it's not just their material that baffles experts, it's the precision of their craftsmanship. Take the Mitchell-Hedges skull, for example. Its jawbone detaches with a seamless fit, moving as smoothly as a modern hinge. How could artisans from 1,000 years ago, working with nothing but stone tools and abrasive sand, achieve such mechanical precision? Even under magnification, some of these skulls show no visible tool marks, as if they were shaped by something beyond human hands. Modern gemologists have tried to recreate the process, using traditional methods like chisels and rotary grinders. The results: rough, uneven surfaces, nothing close to the mirror-like finish of the originals. Some researchers argue that the skulls must have been polished over generations, a labor of love spanning centuries. Others whisper about lost technologies, techniques passed down from civilizations we've yet to fully understand. Then there's the quartz itself, one of the hardest minerals on Earth, resistant to scratches and weathering. Yet these skulls show no signs of wear, no chips or cracks you'd expect from objects buried for ages. It's as if they were meant to last forever, untouched by time. But here's the twist: not all skulls are created equal. While the Mitchell-Hedges specimen and a handful of others exhibit near-flawless symmetry, many lack the same eerie perfection. Some are crudely carved with exaggerated features or uneven proportions. This divide fuels the debate: were the finest skulls relics of a forgotten elite, reserved for priests or rulers? Or do the rougher ones expose the truth, that skilled forgers in the 19th century mixed genuine artifacts with their own creations to meet the booming demand for exotic treasures? The answer might lie in the quartz itself. Trace elements and mineral deposits can reveal where the stone was quarried, yet even this clue leads to dead ends. Some skulls contain quartz found nowhere in Mesoamerica, suggesting they were carved far from where they were supposedly discovered. The more we examine these objects, the more contradictions emerge. Their hollow eyes seem to taunt us, daring us to unravel a mystery that might have no solution. And perhaps that's the point. Whether ancient marvels or elaborate hoaxes, the crystal skulls challenge our assumptions about history, technology, and the limits of human ingenuity. They force us to ask, how much do we really know about the past, and what if the answers aren't just hidden, but waiting to be rediscovered in plain sight? Of all the crystal skulls that have captured the world's imagination, none shines brighter or stirs more controversy than the Mitchell-Hedges specimen. Its story reads like something ripped from the pages of a pulp adventure novel. A teenage girl, Anna Mitchell-Hedges, wandering the overgrown ruins of a Mayan city in British Honduras, modern-day Belize, in 1924. As sunlight filtered through the jungle canopy, she reportedly spotted a glint of crystal beneath the stones of an ancient altar. What she pulled from the earth was no ordinary artifact. It was a life-sized skull, so meticulously carved that every detail from the hollow cheekbones to the detachable jaw seemed to breathe with eerie realism. Her father, the flamboyant explorer F.A. Mitchell-Hedges, would later claim it was a genuine relic of the lost Maya civilization, calling it the embodiment of evil and spinning tales of its supernatural origins. But from the moment it surfaced, the skull's backstory crumbled under scrutiny. No excavation records or independent witnesses could verify Anna's discovery. Even the date shifted in retelling, sometimes placed in the 1920s, other times as late as 1943. Skeptics pointed out that Anna only began speaking publicly about the find decades later, long after similar skulls had already flooded the antiquities market. Then there's the craftsmanship. The skull's jaw fits so perfectly that it moves without friction, a feat even modern jewelers struggle to replicate. Could Maya artisans working without metal tools have achieved such precision? Or was this skull, like others tied to Eugène Boban, a product of 19th century European workshops capitalizing on the era's obsession with the exotic? The mystery deepens with the skull's ominous nickname, the Skull of Doom. Stories swirl around it like smoke, claims that it glows under certain light, that it emits strange sounds, even that it curses those who mock it. Anna herself insisted it held healing powers, while others whispered it had caused fatal illnesses and accidents. Scientists who studied it in the 1970s were baffled. Under magnification, they found no trace of tool marks, as if it had been shaped by some unknown process. Yet when the British Museum tested similar skulls, their analysis pointed to modern rotary tools. Could the Mitchell-Hedges skull be an outlier, a genuine relic among fakes? Or is its legend simply too seductive to dissolve under scrutiny? What makes this skull so compelling isn't just its beauty or the rumors around it, it's the way it reflects our own desires. For believers, it's proof of ancient advanced knowledge. For skeptics, it's a cautionary tale about how easily we're dazzled by mystery, and for everyone else, it remains a riddle wrapped in crystal, daring us to decide where history ends and legend begins. While the Mitchell-Hedges skull dazzles with Hollywood-worthy mystique, the plainer specimens in the British Museum and Paris Musée du Quai Branly tell a far more revealing and controversial story. These less glamorous skulls may lack the dramatic legends, but they've become key players in unraveling the truth behind the entire phenomenon. Take the British Museum's skull, for instance, a milky quartz artifact donated by Tiffany and Company back in 1898. For decades, it was displayed as a genuine pre-Columbian treasure until modern technology exposed its secrets. Microscopic analysis revealed something startling: tiny, parallel grooves left not by ancient hand tools but by 19th century rotary wheels, the kind used by European jewelers. Then there's the Paris skull, tied directly to Eugène Boban himself. Unlike the British Museum's version, this one bears a striking resemblance to Aztec artistic styles, with exaggerated features and a rougher finish. But here's the catch. Records show Boban initially sold it to Mexico's National Museum as an authentic artifact, only for experts to later declare it a fake. The scandal forced Boban to relocate to Paris, where he continued selling skulls to collectors hungry for exotic curiosities. Today, both museums label their skulls as probable 19th century fabrications, products of an era when European fascination with the mystical East fueled a booming market for forgeries. Yet even with these damning revelations, the story doesn't end there. Some researchers point to odd inconsistencies like the Paris skull's quartz composition, which matches material found in Madagascar, not Mesoamerica. How did a stone from across the globe end up in a supposed Aztec artifact? Others note that while the tool marks suggest modern origins, carbon dating can't pinpoint their creation date. Could some skulls be genuine artifacts retouched by later hands to appeal to collectors? Even the British Museum's curators admit their skull's base shows possible signs of ancient wear, hinting at a more complex history than a simple forgery. What makes these museum skulls so compelling isn't just their disputed origins, it's what they reveal about our own relationship with history. They force us to ask, why were 19th century Europeans so eager to believe in these objects? Was it colonial arrogance, a refusal to accept that indigenous cultures could produce such masterpieces without outside influence, or simply the timeless human hunger for mystery? These unassuming crystal heads, stripped of their glamour, might hold the most important lesson of all, that every artifact carries two stories, one of its creation and another of how we chose to see it, sometimes blinding ourselves to the truth in the process. The idea that crystal skulls might be sacred objects from ancient Mesoamerica isn't just speculation, it's rooted in the very real fascination these cultures had with skulls as symbols of power, death, and rebirth. Walk through any museum with Aztec or Mayan artifacts, and you'll see skulls everywhere, carved into temple walls, etched onto ceremonial knives, even fashioned into masks worn during rituals. For the Aztecs, the god Mictlantecuhtli, ruler of the underworld, was often depicted as a skeletal figure, his jaw forever frozen in a silent grin. To them, skulls weren't just reminders of mortality. They were portals to the divine, objects that could channel the energy of ancestors or gods. So when crystal skulls surfaced in the 19th century, it was easy to imagine they'd been plucked from the hands of priests in forgotten temples. But look closer, and the pieces don't all fit. Take the famous Mitchell-Hedges skull. Its smooth, almost anatomical precision stands in stark contrast to the stylized skulls found in Aztec carvings. Authentic Mesoamerican depictions tend to exaggerate features, gaping eye sockets, jagged teeth, flattened noses. The crystal skulls, though, they look eerily realistic, as if modeled after medical specimens rather than artistic traditions. Even more telling is the material. While Mesoamerican cultures did work with quartz, jade, and obsidian were prized for ceremonial objects, there's no evidence they carved life-sized crystal skulls. Not a single one has ever been found in a documented archaeological dig. Then there's the question of purpose. Aztec skull racks, called tzompantli, displayed real skulls of sacrificial victims as offerings to the gods. Mayan rulers wore jade beads symbolic of the underworld's breath, but a translucent quartz skull. No surviving texts or murals mention such objects. If they were so important, why wouldn't they appear alongside other sacred items in tombs or temples? Skeptics argue that the few genuine pre-Columbian crystal carvings, small figurines or amulets, prove artisans had the skill but chose not to make skulls. Unless, of course, these artifacts weren't meant to survive or were never there to begin with, yet the connection persists, fueled by tantalizing gaps in history. Some researchers point to the skull's possible use in divination, suggesting priests might have gazed into its depths to see visions. Others propose they were gifts from gods or star visitors, explaining their absence in the archaeological record. But without concrete evidence, the Mesoamerican link remains a theory wrapped in layers of wishful thinking. What's undeniable is how these cultures' reverence for skulls gave the crystal versions a ready-made mythology, one that forgers like Boban were all too happy to exploit. The truth might be simpler, that we wanted these skulls to be ancient so badly we convinced ourselves they were, and in doing so, we blurred the line between their real history and the one we imagined for them. Eugène Boban wasn't just an antiquarian, he was a master of illusion, a man who knew exactly how to blur the line between history and fantasy. Born in France in 1834, Boban spent decades immersed in Mexico's vibrant artifact trade, cultivating connections that stretched from the palaces of Emperor Maximilian to the drawing rooms of Europe's wealthiest collectors. His reputation as a scholar of pre-Columbian cultures gave him credibility, but his real talent lay in spotting opportunity. By the late 1800s, Europe was gripped by a craze for the exotic Mesoamerican artifacts, especially those with a whiff of the supernatural, commanded staggering prices. And Boban, he had a knack for giving buyers exactly what they wanted, even if it didn't quite exist. The crystal skulls became his most infamous legacy. While he claimed they were ancient relics sourced from Mexican ruins, evidence suggests a far more calculated origin. Records show Boban acquired crates of uncarved quartz from Madagascar and Germany, material he allegedly had sculpted into skulls by artisans in his network. These weren't crude imitations, they were masterpieces of deception polished to mimic the wear of centuries. One of his most famous sales, the so-called Paris skull, was initially sold to Mexico's National Museum as a genuine Aztec artifact. When experts exposed it as a fake, Boban simply pivoted, moving his operation to Paris where demand for the mysterious was even hotter. Yet the question lingers, was Boban a con artist or something more complicated? Some historians argue he genuinely believed in the skull's antiquity, misled by his own enthusiasm. Others point to his meticulous records, notes that carefully omitted details about the skull's origins as proof of deliberate fraud. What's undeniable is the chaos he left in his wake. By flooding the market with ancient crystal skulls, Boban made it nearly impossible to separate authentic artifacts from forgeries. Even today, museums struggle with his legacy. The British Museum's skull, once displayed as a treasure of the Aztec world, now sits in a glass case labeled likely 19th century fabrication, a silent testament to Boban's enduring influence. But here's the twist: Boban's story isn't just about deception. It's a window into an era when archaeology was as much about spectacle as science. European collectors didn't just want artifacts, they wanted relics that fit their romanticized visions of savage civilizations. Boban gave them crystal skulls, objects that seemed to whisper of lost wisdom and dark rituals. In doing so, he didn't just fake history, he shaped how an entire generation imagined the past. And that, perhaps, is the most unsettling truth of all. The skulls may not be ancient, but their power to captivate, that's as real as the quartz they're carved from. The most damning evidence against the crystal skull's ancient origins doesn't come from historians or archaeologists. It comes from gemologists armed with high-powered microscopes. When researchers at the British Museum and the Smithsonian examined their skulls under magnification, they found telltale scratches, tiny parallel grooves left not by hand tools but by rotary wheels. These mechanical abrasions, invisible to the naked eye, are the fingerprint of 19th century jewelers, not pre-Columbian artisans. Quartz, one of the hardest minerals on Earth, would have been nearly impossible to carve with the tools available to the Maya or Aztecs. Yet with industrial-era technology, suddenly, those flawless surfaces and seamless hinges make perfect sense. This revelation ties directly to a booming underground market of the 1800s, where European collectors paid fortunes for exotic artifacts, real or not. Museums and private buyers craved objects that fit their romanticized visions of primitive civilizations, and entrepreneurs were happy to supply them. Skulls became particularly lucrative. Their eerie beauty and association with death made them irresistible to Victorians obsessed with the occult. Enterprising craftsmen in Germany and France began mass-producing them, often using Brazilian or Madagascan quartz to add an air of authenticity. Some were crude, but others, like the Mitchell-Hedges skull, were works of art in their own right, designed to baffle even experts. Science has since dismantled nearly every claim of antiquity. Spectrographic analysis reveals that many skulls contain traces of modern polishing compounds like aluminum oxide, unknown before the Industrial Revolution. Carbon dating is useless on inorganic quartz, but historical records tell their own story. Not a single skull was documented before the 1860s, and most surfaced through a handful of dealers, Eugène Boban foremost among them. Even the British Museum's skull, once a crown jewel of their collection, was quietly reclassified as a probable fake after tests showed its quartz matched none of Mesoamerica's known deposits. Yet the hoax theory isn't just about debunking myths. It's a window into the colonial mindset of the era, where artifacts were often improved to fit European expectations. Many genuine pre-Columbian objects were altered, recarved, repolished, or combined with modern elements, To make them more appealing to buyers, the crystal skulls might be the ultimate example of this, objects crafted not to deceive but to fulfill a fantasy. They weren't just fakes, they were mirrors reflecting back what their audience wanted to see, a lost world of mystery ripe for the taking, and in that sense their true power wasn't supernatural. It was the ability to reveal how easily we reshape the past to suit our own stories. Beyond the debates over craftsmanship and forgery lies a stranger dimension of the crystal skull, legend one where these objects aren't just artifacts but conduits for otherworldly energy. Stories swirl of skulls glowing in the dark, their hollow eyes pulsing with an eerie light no flashlight can explain. Others whisper of bizarre physical reactions, headaches, visions, even sudden bouts of healing. Paranormal investigator Nick Nosrino, who spent decades studying these objects, claimed certain skulls emitted measurable electromagnetic fields, as if humming with an unseen power. He described holding one and feeling a tingling sensation crawl up his arms, his fingers growing inexplicably warm. But here's the catch: none of these experiences hold up under scientific scrutiny. When researchers tried to replicate Nosrino's tests, their instruments detected nothing unusual. So why do these stories persist with such intensity? Perhaps it's the power of suggestion. Place a perfectly carved crystal skull in a dimly lit room, tell someone it's cursed or sacred, and the human mind does the rest. A study published in the Journal of Cognitive Neuroscience found that even skeptics, when exposed to objects labeled paranormal, reported heightened sensory experiences, racing hearts, blurred vision purely from expectation. This might explain why so many of the skull's supposed effects are subjective. Feelings of dread, fleeting glimpses of faces in the quartz, or sudden temperature changes no thermometer can confirm. Even Anna Mitchell-Hedges insisted her skull could project images of distant places onto its surface, though no one else ever witnessed it, yet some accounts defy easy dismissal. In the 1980s, a lab technician working with a crystal skull claimed it began vibrating in her hands, emitting a sound like a distant choir. Another researcher swore his equipment malfunctioned whenever the skull was nearby, his cameras capturing streaks of light with no apparent source. These stories share an unsettling pattern. The effects vanish the moment outsiders arrive to document them, leaving only whispered anecdotes. It's a phenomenon familiar to paranormal investigators. The harder you look, the faster the evidence slips away. The most enduring theory that the skulls act as amplifiers, tuning into the energy of those who handle them. Psychics like Nosrino believed the quartz's molecular structure could store intentions or emotions like a cosmic recording device. If true, it would mean the skulls aren't inherently magical. They're mirrors reflecting back whatever energy we pour into them. A tool for healing in the right hands, a cursed object in the wrong ones, of course without verifiable proof. These ideas remain in the realm of folklore. But that's the thing about the crystal skulls, they thrive in the space between fact and belief, where the lines blur just enough to keep us wondering. And maybe that's their greatest power of all. It all started with a whisper, an idea that these shimmering artifacts weren't just relics but keys to something far grander. By the time Indiana Jones slammed his fedora onto his head and raced through the jungle in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, the line between fact and fiction had already melted away. Hollywood didn't just borrow the mystery of the crystal skulls, it poured gasoline on it, transforming them from obscure curiosities into worldwide symbols of the supernatural. The film's plot, interdimensional beings, lost cities, and skulls humming with alien energy, was pure fantasy, but it tapped into a mythology that had been brewing for decades. Suddenly, audiences everywhere were convinced these objects held secrets beyond archaeology. Long before Indy cracked his whip on screen, pulp novels and fringe authors were spinning tales around the skulls. In the 1930s, occultist Frederick Mitchell-Hedges, father of Anna, the famed skull's discoverer, wrote breathless accounts of his daughter's find, suggesting it was a relic of Atlantis or a tool for psychic warfare. New Age movements in the 70s latched onto these ideas, claiming the skulls were ancient data storage devices, their quartz crystals capable of holding memories like cosmic hard drives. Books like The Mystery of the Crystal Skulls by Chris Morton and Sarah Louise Thomas blended half-truths with outright speculation, painting the artifacts as gifts from star visitors or remnants of a global prehistoric civilization. The more outlandish the theory, the more it stuck, but pop culture's influence cuts both ways. For every believer drawn in by the allure of Indiana Jones or the X-Files, there's a skeptic rolling their eyes. Scientists cringe at the way films and TV reduce complex history to flashy pseudoscience. Archaeologists point out that the skull's sudden fame overshadowed legitimate research into Mesoamerican cultures, reducing entire civilizations to a backdrop for alien conspiracies. Even museums struggled with the fallout. Curators at the British Museum reported visitors demanding to know why their fake skull didn't glow like the one in the movies. Yet there's no denying the skull's grip on our imagination. Video games like Tomb Raider and Uncharted feature them as plot devices, while modern mystics still gather at skull ceremonies, convinced they can channel healing energy. The irony, many of these myths trace back to the very fabrications of Eugène Boban and his peers. The cycle is self-perpetuating. The more fiction amplifies the mystery, the more people reinterpret history to match. And so the crystal skulls endure not as ancient artifacts or even clever hoaxes, but as mirrors reflecting our endless hunger for the unexplained. Whether that's a testament to their power or our own gullibility depends on who you ask. When it comes to the crystal skulls, the archaeological record is frustratingly silent. Not a single skull has ever been uncovered in a documented, professionally excavated Mesoamerican site. This absence speaks volumes. Imagine if the pyramids of Egypt or the temples of Angkor Wat had no construction records, no tools left behind, no carvings referencing their creation. Yet for the crystal skulls, there's nothing. No ancient texts mention them. No murals depict priests holding their translucent forms. Even in the vast troves of looted artifacts that flooded European markets in the 19th century, none were linked to verifiable digs. The few skulls that surfaced did so through dubious channels, often with stories that changed with each telling. That said, quartz carving itself wasn't unknown to pre-Columbian cultures. The Maya and Aztecs created exquisite small-scale objects, beads, figurines, even intricate ear spools, from materials like jade, obsidian, and occasionally rock crystal. A handful of these survive, like the tiny quartz frog found at Teotihuacan or the delicate crystal pendant from a Maya tomb in Belize. But here's the critical difference. These verified artifacts are miniature, often symbolic, and stylistically consistent with other works from their era. Compare them to the life-sized crystal skulls, and the discrepancies scream. Authentic Mesoamerican carvings embrace abstraction, exaggerated features, symbolic geometry. The skulls, with their anatomical precision, look like they belong in a Renaissance medical textbook, not a sacred temple. Then there's the matter of tool marks. Legitimate ancient quartz objects show the telltale signs of lapidary techniques available at the time: chiseling, pecking, grinding with abrasive sands. Under magnification, their surfaces reveal uneven grooves and microscopic fractures. The crystal skulls, by contrast, often exhibit the smooth, uniform scratches of rotary wheels, a technology the Maya and Aztecs simply didn't have. Even the few skulls that show older tool marks, like the Smithsonian specimen, display a mix of techniques, suggesting they might have been reworked by later hands. It's as if someone took a genuine artifact and enhanced it to meet 19th century tastes. Perhaps the most damning evidence lies in the skull's sheer rarity. If these objects were central to Mesoamerican rituals, where are the broken fragments, the discarded attempts? Ancient workshops left behind debris piles littered with shattered jade and obsidian, proof of trial and error. Yet not one quartz skull shard has ever turned up in these contexts. The closest parallel comes from a different continent entirely: Roman-era crystal goblets and cups, carved with similar precision, but centuries later and half a world away. This isn't to say pre-Columbian artisans couldn't have achieved such mastery, only that if they did, they left no trail behind. Yet the debate isn't entirely one-sided. A few researchers point to the skull's spiritual resonance, arguing that their absence from digs might reflect their sacred status. In many cultures, objects of power were deliberately hidden or destroyed to protect their secrets. Could the skulls have been so revered that priests concealed them from even their own people? It's a romantic notion, but without concrete evidence, it remains wishful thinking. What we're left with is a paradox: artifacts too perfect to dismiss outright, yet too anomalous to fit the historical record. They dangle just beyond the reach of proof, tantalizing us with questions we may never fully answer. Quartz isn't just another pretty stone, it's one of the most abundant minerals on Earth, yet its properties made it invaluable to ancient civilizations long before the crystal skulls entered the picture. The Maya and Aztec peoples prized quartz for its durability and clarity, using it to craft everything from ceremonial blades to divination tools. Its hardness, ranking just below diamond on the Mohs scale, meant it could hold an edge sharper than obsidian, making it ideal for cutting and scraping. But its real magic lay in its translucency. When light passed through a quartz fragment, it seemed to carry something otherworldly, a quality that linked it to visions, communication with spirits, and the divine. In Mesoamerican cosmology, clear quartz was sometimes called the breath of the gods, believed to capture and amplify energy like a spiritual microphone. Yet despite this reverence, no other large-scale quartz carvings from these cultures have ever been found. Compare this to jade, another sacred material, which appears in massive tablets, intricate masks, and even royal scepters. If quartz was so spiritually significant, why didn't it inspire similarly grand creations? One theory points to practicality. Quartz's extreme hardness made it brutally difficult to carve without modern tools. While jade could be shaped with patient grinding, quartz required abrasives like diamond dust, something Mesoamerican artisans didn't have. Even small quartz beads show signs of painstaking labor, their surfaces pocked with trial and error marks. The idea of crafting a life-sized skull under these conditions seems almost unimaginable, like trying to sculpt an ice sculpture with a butter knife. Then there's the spiritual context. In many indigenous traditions, materials weren't chosen at random. They carried specific meanings tied to their natural state. Jade, for example, symbolized fertility and eternal life because of its lush green hue, mirroring the rainforest. Quartz, with its ice-like purity, often represented clarity, wisdom, or celestial connection. But skulls, they were overwhelmingly linked to death and the underworld, realms more commonly associated with darker stones like obsidian. This mismatch raises questions. Would a culture that depicted skulls in rough, dramatic carvings suddenly switch to flawless crystal for the same symbol? Or does the skull's aesthetic, sleek, modern, almost clinical, betray a later hand at work? The most telling clue might lie in the quartz itself. Modern geochemical analysis can trace a stone's origin by its mineral fingerprint, and here the skulls defy Mesoamerican logic. Many were carved from Brazilian or Madagascan quartz, materials utterly foreign to pre-Columbian trade networks. Even local quartz deposits show no evidence of large-scale mining for carving projects. Meanwhile, in Europe, 19th century, lapidaries had access to global gem markets and mechanized tools that could tackle quartz with ease. The skull's material doesn't just fail to connect them to ancient Mesoamerica, it actively ties them to the era of their supposed discovery. But what if we've been asking the wrong question? Instead of wondering why no other giant quartz artifacts exist, perhaps we should consider why these skulls were made at all. Quartz's allure isn't just ancient, it's universal. From Viking navigators using sunstones to polarize light to Tibetan monks crafting crystal singing bowls, cultures worldwide have attributed supernatural qualities to this humble mineral. The skulls tap into that timeless fascination, blending it with the exoticism Europeans projected onto Mesoamerica. In the end, their power might not come from any authentic past, but from our own longing to believe in something beyond the ordinary, a craving as old as humanity itself. Anna Mitchell-Hedges spent her entire life weaving an intricate tapestry of stories around the crystal skull she famously discovered. From the moment she first held it aloft in the jungles of Belize, or so she claimed, the artifact became her life's work, her obsession, and ultimately her burden. She insisted the skull was a genuine relic of the Maya, a sacred object imbued with inexplicable powers. But as the decades passed, skeptics began picking apart her narrative with surgical precision. The inconsistencies piled up, the shifting dates of discovery, the lack of corroborating witnesses, even the odd fact that her father, F.A. Mitchell-Hedges, had never mentioned the skull in his own expedition journals. Yet Anna doubled down, touring the world with the skull, granting interviews where she described its ability to cure ailments or project visions. To her, it wasn't just an artifact, it was a living mystery. Detractors weren't so kind. Archaeologist Norman Hammond publicly dismissed her claims as romantic fabrications, pointing out that no other Mayan site had ever yielded anything remotely resembling the skull. Others noted how conveniently its emergence coincided with the peak of Europe's obsession with exotic antiquities. Even family friends whispered that Anna's stories grew taller with each retelling. One moment the skull was a ceremonial object, the next a weapon of Atlantis. The most damning accusation, that the skull was a purchased curiosity, possibly acquired by her father from none other than Eugène Boban himself, then rebranded as a jungle discovery to boost its allure. Scientific tests didn't help her case. When researchers asked to examine the skull in the 1970s, Anna initially refused, later relenting only under strict conditions. The results were inconclusive, neither confirming its age nor exposing definitive proof of forgery. Yet for all the controversy, Anna's fervent advocacy left an indelible mark. She wasn't just defending an object, she was championing the idea that history held secrets beyond textbooks. Even her critics acknowledged her sincerity. She genuinely believed in the skull's power, whether it was ancient or not. That passion came at a cost. As academia turned its back, she became a fixture on the fringe circuit, trading scholarly credibility for late-night radio shows and New Age conferences. By the time of her death in 2007, the skull's legacy was as polarized as ever. To some, a priceless relic, to others, the centerpiece of a lifelong performance. The irony, Anna's tireless campaign might have obscured the very truth she sought to prove. In elevating the skull to mythic status, she ensured it would never be judged solely on its merits. Instead, it became a Rorschach test, a blank quartz surface onto which people projected their own beliefs about history, hoaxes, and the thin line between them. And perhaps that's the most fitting epitaph for her crusade, not a discovery, but a reflection of our endless hunger for wonder. By the 1960s, the crystal skulls had faded into obscurity until a cultural earthquake known as the New Age movement shook them back to life. Suddenly, these enigmatic objects weren't just curiosities. They were cosmic conduits, ancient computers, even tools for interstellar communication. Bookstores overflowed with titles claiming the skulls held secrets of Atlantis or were left behind by extraterrestrial visitors. Workshops sprouted up, offering hand-carved replicas marketed not as souvenirs but as spiritual amplifiers. A California-based group called the Society of Crystal Enlightenment sold skulls said to align chakras and open third eyes, their ads plastered in the back pages of fringe magazines. The artifacts, once dismissed as Victorian hoaxes, were reborn as sacred technology, their mythos growing wilder with each retelling. Central to this revival was a man named Frank Dorland, an art restorer who became obsessed with the Mitchell-Hedges skull after studying it in the late 1960s. Dorland claimed the skull emitted strange sounds, changed colors under certain light, and even defied the laws of physics by remaining cool to the touch in sweltering rooms. His stories, published in sensationalist paperbacks, became gospel for New Age adherents. Workshops began offering skull activations, where participants would gather around replicas, hands outstretched, convinced they could feel energy pulsing from the quartz. The irony was thick. Objects possibly born from 19th century deception were now revered as relics of a purer, lost wisdom. Commercialism fed the frenzy. Crystal vendors in Sedona and Santa Fe couldn't keep skulls in stock, their prices soaring from $50 to thousands. Some sellers swore their replicas were carved from authentic Atlantean quartz, while others promised skulls energetically imprinted by Tibetan monks. The most audacious even claimed their products were fragments of a mother skull hidden beneath a Mexican pyramid. Archaeologists winced as the line between artifact and invention blurred beyond recognition. Yet the demand only grew because what these skulls offered wasn't history, but a tantalizing what-if. The movement's pinnacle came in 1983, when New Age luminary Marcel Vogel unveiled his Vogel crystal skull's precision-cut quartz supposedly programmed with healing frequencies. Vogel, a former IBM scientist, lent an air of legitimacy to the craze, his workshops drawing crowds eager to believe science and spirituality could merge. Critics pointed out his skulls bore no resemblance to pre-Columbian art, but no matter. By then, the crystal skull had transcended its origins, becoming a blank slate for every utopian dream and conspiracy theory of the era. Looking back, this chapter reveals less about the skulls themselves than about the human need to believe. Stripped of their dubious past, they became vessels for a generation's hunger for transcendence. And in that sense, their power was undeniable, not as ancient artifacts, but as mirrors reflecting our timeless longing for magic in a world that insists on facts. Modern science has turned its most powerful tools on the crystal skulls, peeling back layers of mystery with techniques that would seem like magic to the 19th century artisans who may have crafted them. Electron microscopes capable of magnifying surfaces thousands of times reveal scratches invisible to the naked eye, tiny, parallel grooves left by rotary wheels, the hallmark of industrial-era lapidary tools. X-ray diffraction goes deeper, analyzing the crystal's atomic structure to detect modern polishing compounds like aluminum oxide, a telltale sign of post-industrial fabrication. Even spectroscopy plays a role, tracing the mineral's chemical fingerprint to quarries in Brazil or Madagascar, far from Mesoamerican trade routes. One by one, these methods point to the same conclusion. The skulls are products of the 1800s, not ancient relics. Yet the science isn't entirely bulletproof. Carbon dating, archaeology's gold standard for organic materials, is useless on inorganic quartz. While tool marks suggest modern origins, they can't pin down an exact decade. Some skulls show a puzzling mix of techniques: rough, ancient-looking chisel marks near mechanically polished surfaces, as if someone retouched an older artifact to make it more marketable. The British Museum's skull, for instance, has a base worn smooth in a way that hints at centuries of handling, even as its facial details scream 19th century craftsmanship. These contradictions leave just enough ambiguity for believers to cling to the idea that some skulls might be ancient cores later, enhanced by forgers. Then there's the problem of access. The most famous skulls, like the Mitchell-Hedges specimen, have spent decades in private collections, shielded from rigorous testing. When Anna Mitchell-Hedges finally allowed limited analysis in the 1970s, she imposed strict conditions: no invasive sampling, no extended examinations. Scientists got mere hours with the skull, leaving them unable to perform exhaustive tests. Similar restrictions plague other high-profile specimens, their owners wary of anything that might diminish their value or mystique. It's a frustrating loop. The less a skull is studied, the more its legend grows, making owners even more protective. Perhaps the most revealing test came from modern artisans. In 2008, a team led by archaeologists at the British Museum attempted to recreate a crystal skull using only pre-Columbian tools, stone chisels, sand abrasives, and water. After months of labor, their result was crude and asymmetrical, a far cry from the museum's own polished specimen. The experiment proved what theorists had long suspected. Crafting something as flawless as the Mitchell-Hedges skull would have required not just skill, but technology the Maya simply didn't possess. Still, gaps persist. Why do a few skulls contain quartz with trace elements matching Mesoamerican sources? Could they be rare, authentic pieces or clever forgeries using local stone? And why did museums like the Smithsonian and the Musée du Quai Branly acquire their skulls with such confidence in the late 1800s, only to quietly declassify them decades later? The answers may lie in the imperfect science of provenance, the murky paper trails and embellished stories that once passed as authentication. For every test that exposes a fake, there's a whisper of doubt, a lingering question that keeps the mystery alive. Science has pulled back the curtain on the skulls, but the shadows behind it still hold secrets. Of all the theories swirling around the crystal skulls, none ignite the imagination quite like the idea that they're not of this world, or at least not of our time. For decades, fringe researchers and alternative historians have spun tales connecting these eerie artifacts to lost civilizations and interstellar visitors. Take David Hatcher Childress, a self-styled rogue archaeologist who's built a career on rewriting history's outlier chapters. In his books, he paints the skulls as remnants of Atlantis, crafted by a high-tech society that vanished beneath the waves. According to him, the skull's flawless precision and alleged energy properties point to knowledge far beyond what ancient Mesoamerica could muster. But here's the catch. Not a single shard of Atlantis has ever been found, no ruins, no artifacts, no records outside of Plato's allegorical dialogues. So why the skulls? Childress argues they're one of the few survivors, hidden away before the cataclysm and later rediscovered. Then there's the extraterrestrial angle, fueled by claims that the skulls defy conventional physics. Proponents like Swiss author Erich von Däniken, famous for Chariots of the Gods, suggest the skulls are data storage devices left by ancient astronauts, alien visitors who seeded Earth with advanced technology. Some even point to the skulls' alleged ability to induce visions or emit light as proof of their otherworldly origins. Anecdotes abound of psychics channeling messages from the skulls, describing star maps or warnings of cosmic upheaval. But when pressed for hard evidence, the case crumbles. No scientific study has ever detected unusual energy fields or encoded data in the quartz. And while quartz does have piezoelectric properties, meaning it can generate electricity under pressure, there's no proof this was harnessed intentionally, let alone by extraterrestrials. What's fascinating isn't just the theories themselves, but why they persist. The skulls tap into a deeper human obsession, the longing for a past more extraordinary than the one we've uncovered. Atlantis and aliens offer grand narratives, explanations that transform these objects from mere carvings into cosmic artifacts with destinies. It's no accident that these ideas gained traction in the 1960s and 70s, an era of counterculture and space-age optimism. The skulls became blank screens for our fantasies, reflecting whatever mythology we projected onto them, whether it was New Age spirituality or Cold War era fears of hidden knowledge. Yet for all their allure, these theories share a critical flaw. They dismiss the skull's human origins without offering credible alternatives. No Atlantean tools or texts have ever been found to corroborate the claims, and no alien technology has been convincingly linked to the quarries where the quartz was sourced. Even the skull's most ardent mystical supporters struggle to explain why, if they're so powerful, their effects can't be reliably replicated under controlled conditions. The truth is likely simpler if less glamorous. The skulls are masterpieces of human ingenuity, products of an era when artistry and deception walked hand in hand. But here's the twist. Some scientists argue the wild theories aren't entirely worthless. They force us to ask uncomfortable questions about gaps in the archaeological record. Why did pre-Columbian cultures venerate quartz? How did artisans achieve such precision without modern tools? Even if Atlantis and aliens are pure fiction, they highlight how much we still don't know about the past. And in that sense, the skull's greatest power might not be as relics or hoaxes, but as reminders that history is always more complicated than it seems. The line between myth and fact isn't just blurred, it's alive, shifting with every new discovery and every story we dare to tell. In 1992, the Smithsonian Institution received a package that would reignite the crystal skull debate for a new generation. Inside was a massive milky quartz skull, heavier than a bowling ball and eerily lifelike, sent by an anonymous donor who claimed it was a genuine pre-Columbian artifact. Unlike the smaller, more famous specimens, this skull had no romantic backstory, no jungle expeditions, no treasure hunters. Just a plain cardboard box with a note suggesting it had been acquired in Mexico in the 1960s. Yet from the moment curators lifted it from its packing peanuts, questions swirled. Its sheer size alone made it an outlier, far larger than any known Mesoamerican quartz carvings, yet oddly proportioned, with exaggerated features that seemed more theatrical than ceremonial. Was this a lost relic or another chapter in the long history of crystal skull hoaxes? Scientists at the Smithsonian's Mineral Sciences Lab wasted no time putting the skull under the microscope, literally. Initial tests revealed deep, curved tool marks inconsistent with ancient hand-carving techniques, instead pointing to modern rotary equipment. Spectrographic analysis added another wrinkle. The quartz contained traces of silicon carbide, an abrasive only used in lapidary work after the late 19th century. Case closed, not quite. While the evidence leaned heavily toward forgery, odd inconsistencies remained. The skull's base showed unusual wear patterns, pitted and smoothed in a way that suggested centuries of handling. Even more puzzling, traces of red pigment clung to its teeth, a detail absent from known 19th century fakes but eerily reminiscent of sacred Maya practices, where skulls were sometimes painted with ceremonial dyes. For believers, these ambiguities became fuel for hope. Could the skull be an authentic artifact later retouched by modern hands, or was it a deliberate forgery designed to fool even experts with fake, ancient wear added for credibility? The Smithsonian itself hedged its bets, labeling the skull likely 20th century, but acknowledging the gaps in its provenance. That uncertainty mirrors the broader debate swirling around these objects. To skeptics, the Smithsonian skull is a textbook example of how skilled forgers exploit our hunger for mystery. Yet for others, it represents something deeper, the nagging sense that not all questions have answers, and that some artifacts refuse to fit neatly into categories of real or fake. What makes this skull particularly fascinating isn't just its contested origins, but how it encapsulates the evolving nature of archaeological fraud. Unlike the crude fakes of the Victorian era, this specimen shows signs of sophistication, a forger who understood both modern science and ancient aesthetics, creating an object designed to withstand scrutiny. In that sense, it's a fitting symbol for the crystal skull phenomenon itself, artifacts that challenge not just our understanding of history, but our ability to discern truth from deception. Whether ancient or modern, their power lies in the shadows they cast, long, twisting, and impossible to ignore. The rise of crystal skulls as New Age icons hasn't just sparked debates about their origins, it's ignited a firestorm over who has the right to claim their meaning. For many modern Maya communities, the skull's transformation into spiritual commodities feels like theft. Imagine discovering an object you've never seen before suddenly being sold as a sacred relic of your ancestors, packaged with incense and workshops promising ancient wisdom. That's the reality for indigenous groups across Mesoamerica, who watch as these artifacts, likely forged in 19th century Europe, are rebranded as mystical tools tied to their cultures. The disconnect cuts deep. While New Age sellers market skulls as Mayan healing devices or Aztec spirit channels, actual Maya spiritual leaders point out that their traditions never included anything resembling these objects. Take the words of Pedro Cruz, a Kayich Maya elder from Guatemala, who's spoken out against the commercialization of the skulls. These crystals have nothing to do with our ceremonies. Our ancestors worked with corn, with obsidian, with the earth, not with giant quartz heads. His frustration echoes across indigenous activist circles, where the skulls symbolize a larger pattern of cultural exploitation. Museums and shops alike often display them alongside genuine pre-Columbian artifacts, reinforcing the false narrative that they're part of a continuous tradition. The harm isn't just symbolic, it's economic. Tourists flock to buy authentic crystal skulls from non-indigenous vendors, while Maya artisans struggling to preserve genuine craft techniques, like backstrap weaving or traditional pottery, go unrecognized. Yet the appropriation goes deeper than commerce. New Age practitioners often cherry-pick elements of Maya spirituality, sacred calendars, spirit animals, and mash them together with the skulls into a spiritual smoothie that bears little resemblance to living traditions. Workshops promise participants the chance to channel Mayan shamans through skull meditations, despite the fact that Maya spiritual practice is deeply tied to specific lineages, languages, and community rites. It's a paradox. The very people romanticized as mystical guides are often excluded from the conversation about how their culture is represented. Some indigenous scholars, like Yucatec Maya historian Patricia Martinez, argue the skull phenomenon reflects a colonial mindset that's never really faded. First, Europeans took our land and called us primitive. Now they take our image and call us magical, but only when it suits them. Her words underscore the double standard. When Maya communities practice their own religions, they've faced centuries of suppression. Yet when outsiders repackage those traditions as marketable spirituality, they're celebrated as enlightened. The result is a bizarre erasure. Indigenous people are either stripped of their cultural agency or reduced to silent, mystical figures in someone else's fantasy. Not all indigenous voices reject the skulls entirely, though. A handful of Maya artists and activists have reclaimed them as symbols of resistance, subverting their colonial origins. In Chichicastenango, one cooperative now crafts satirical crystal skulls with glued-on mustaches or dollar signs etched into the foreheads, a jab at the commercialization they represent. Others, like Tz'utujil Maya artist Luna Martinez, incorporate broken skull fragments into installations critiquing cultural theft. If they want mystery, I'll show them the real mystery, why our pain sells better than our joy. These interventions force a question rarely asked in New Age circles: who benefits from the stories we tell about the past? The skull's journey from dubious artifacts to spiritual commodities reveals an uncomfortable truth about how Western audiences engage with indigenous cultures. It's rarely about listening to living communities, it's about projecting fantasies onto them. The real mystery isn't whether the skulls are ancient, it's why we're so eager to believe they are, even when the people most affected by that narrative are telling us otherwise. Perhaps their greatest power lies not in their quartz, but in the mirror they hold up to our own storytelling, what we choose to amplify, what we ignore, and who gets to decide when the past is truly sacred. A British Museum study in 2008 should have been the final nail in the coffin for the crystal skull's ancient origins, but like all good mysteries, the evidence came with its own twists. Researchers subjected their skull to a battery of tests, including scanning electron microscopy that revealed microscopic parallel grooves on its surface. These weren't the irregular scratches left by hand tools or abrasive sands, but the telltale marks of high-speed rotary wheels technology that didn't exist in pre-Columbian Mesoamerica. The team even hired a master lapidary, experiment archaeologist John Francis, to attempt replicating the skull using only traditional methods. After months of painstaking work with stone chisels and sand, his result was lopsided and crude, its surface pockmarked with imperfections. The conclusion seemed inescapable. Creating something as flawless as the museum's skull would have required industrial-era precision. Yet the study's most fascinating revelation wasn't just about tools, it was about intent. The analysis showed the skull's carvers had deliberately mimicked ancient techniques in some areas, like the rough-hewn base, while using modern methods for finer details. This wasn't a clumsy forgery, it was a calculated deception designed to fool experts. The forgers understood exactly what 19th-century collectors wanted. An object that looked convincingly ancient where it mattered, but dazzlingly perfect where it would draw awe. Even the quartz itself played into the ruse. While Mesoamerican artisans typically worked with local materials, the museum's skull contained trace elements pointing to Brazilian mines quartz that would have been accessible to European traders but unknown to the Maya. Still, the study didn't silence believers. Some critics pointed out that only a handful of skulls have undergone such rigorous analysis, leaving room for doubt about others. Others seized on minor anomalies like faint traces of ochre in one specimen's crevices as proof of ancient ritual use. Then there's the emotional resistance. For decades, the skulls have been embedded in pop culture and spiritual movements as icons of mystery. Accepting their forgery means unraveling not just their history, but the stories we've built around them. It's no surprise that even faced with overwhelming evidence, some still cling to the romance of the unsolved. The real lesson here isn't just about the skulls themselves, it's about how we authenticate the past. Science can expose tool marks and mineral traces, but it can't always erase the allure of a good story. And in that gap between data and desire, legends thrive. Behind every controversial artifact lies a shadow market of buyers whose wealth and influence shape history, or at least the stories we tell about it. The crystal skulls owe much of their mystique to private collectors, a network of wealthy enthusiasts who transformed them from curiosities into coveted treasures. Tiffany & Company, the famed New York jeweler, wasn't just a seller of luxury gems, it became an unlikely player in the skull trade. In 1898, the firm acquired a milky quartz skull through Eugène Boban's connections and later donated it to the British Museum, lending an air of legitimacy to an object already shrouded in debate. But Tiffany's involvement was no altruistic gesture. The skull was part of a booming trade in exotic antiquities, where artifacts, real or fabricated, were snapped up by elites eager to display their sophistication. The price tags were staggering for the era, equivalent to tens of thousands today, turning these objects into status symbols as much as mysteries. This collector frenzy had dire consequences for archaeology. Unlike documented excavations, private sales left no paper trail, erasing crucial context about where and how the skulls were found. Dealers like Boban thrived in this ambiguity, spinning elaborate backstories to justify ever higher prices. The result, many skulls vanished into private vaults, inaccessible to scholars who might have exposed their true origins. Take the case of a Parisian industrialist who reportedly owned 3 skulls in the 1920s, showcasing them at dinner parties as conversation pieces. When researchers requested access, they were rebuffed. The owner prized secrecy over science. Decades later, those skulls resurfaced at auction, their histories even murkier, their value inflated by decades of deliberate obscurity. The ethics of this trade remain hotly contested. On one side, collectors argue that private ownership preserves artifacts that might otherwise be lost or looted. Some even fund research, like the anonymous donor who gifted the Smithsonian its massive skull in 1992. Yet critics counter that secrecy corrupts the historical record. Without transparency, artifacts become blank slates for whatever narrative sells best. The British Museum's skull, for instance, was displayed as Aztec for nearly a century before modern analysis revealed its likely European origins, a truth that might have emerged sooner if independent study hadn't been stifled by proprietary claims. Today, the tension persists. Auction houses still list crystal skulls with vague provenance, appealing to buyers who crave a piece of the unknown. Meanwhile, museums walk a tightrope, debating whether to display contested artifacts at all, knowing their presence might legitimize questionable pasts. The real tragedy isn't just the money or the myths. It's the lost opportunity to understand how these objects truly fit into history, if they ever did. Because every skull locked away in a private collection isn't just an artifact hidden. It's a question left unanswered. The crystal skulls aren't alone in the gallery of archaeological deceptions. They're part of a much older tradition, one where ambition and illusion collide to rewrite history. Take the Piltdown Man, perhaps the most infamous fraud of all time. In 1912, amateur archaeologist Charles Dawson unveiled what he claimed was the missing link between apes and humans, a skull with a human-like cranium and an ape-like jaw, supposedly discovered in a gravel pit in England. For decades, it was celebrated as proof that human evolution began in Europe, a narrative that flattered British nationalism and colonial pride. Sound familiar? Like the crystal skulls, Piltdown Man thrived in an era hungry for validation, where scientific rigor often took a backseat to spectacle. Both were embraced not because they were flawless, but because they told stories people wanted to believe. Yet the parallels run deeper than just motive. Both hoaxes exploited gaps in knowledge. In Piltdown's case, early 20th century, paleontology lacked the tools to easily date bones or spot chemical forgeries. The skull's perpetrators stained the bones with potassium dichromate to mimic age, a trick that fooled experts for over 40 years. Similarly, the crystal skulls capitalized on 19th century archaeology's limited understanding of Mesoamerican lapidary techniques. Without advanced microscopy or mineral analysis, even seasoned scholars could mistake industrial tool marks for ancient craftsmanship. Both frauds endured because they targeted blind spots in the science of their time, hiding in the shadows of what wasn't yet known. What's truly revealing, though, is how these hoaxes reflect the cultural currents that birthed them. Piltdown Man emerged during the height of European imperialism, when nations raced to claim the cradle of civilization as their own. The skulls, meanwhile, rose to prominence as Western museums and collectors pillaged the global South for exotic trophies. Both became symbols not of truth, but of power artifacts weaponized to reinforce dominant narratives. The skulls, like Piltdown, were less about archaeology than ideology, their value measured in prestige rather than provenance. But here's where the stories diverge. While Piltdown Man was fully discredited by the 1950s, the crystal skulls have lingered in the public imagination, transforming from debunked curiosities into new age icons. Why? Because Piltdown's appeal was rooted in nationalism, a narrative that crumbled when science advanced. The skulls, though, tap into something more enduring, a universal fascination with the unexplained. They're not just relics or fakes, they're blank canvases, capable of absorbing whatever myths we project onto them. Where Piltdown was a lie that collapsed under scrutiny, the skulls are a mirror, reflecting our endless desire for magic in a world that insists on facts. The lesson isn't just that we've been fooled before, it's that we're wired to be fooled again. From the Cardiff giant, a 10-foot-tall, petrified man, carved from gypsum in 1869, to the more recent case of the Japanese Paleolithic hoaxes, archaeological frauds follow a pattern. They flourish where money, ego, and mystery intersect, where the hunger for discovery outstrips the patience for proof. The crystal skulls, like their predecessors, remind us that history isn't just written by the victors, it's sometimes rewritten by the cunning, the credulous, and those who profit from the space between. Yet there's a twist. While Piltdown Man is now a cautionary footnote, the skulls have taken on a second life beyond their fraudulent origins. They've become cultural artifacts in their own right, symbols of humanity's obsession with the arcane. In that sense, their legacy isn't just about deception, it's about durability. They've outlasted their creators' intentions, evolving from 19th century fakes into 21st century icons. And perhaps that's the most telling paradox of all. The things meant to trick us sometimes reveal more about who we are than the truths we painstakingly uncover. Walk into any crystal shop from Sedona to Shanghai today, and you'll likely find a version of the crystal skull staring back at you, not behind museum glass, but nestled between amethyst geodes and rose quartz pyramids. The modern market for these replicas has exploded, turning what was once a niche curiosity into a global phenomenon. Some are cheap, palm-sized knickknacks molded from industrial quartz and sold for less than the price of a coffee. Others are painstakingly hand-carved by master lapidaries, their price tags stretching into the thousands. But whether mass-produced or meticulously crafted, these contemporary skulls share one thing in common. They're feeding the legend's afterlife, reshaping how we engage with a mystery that was never fully solved. The sheer variety is staggering. Online marketplaces offer skulls in every hue: smoky quartz for grounding, rose quartz for love, even luridly dyed specimens in neon pink or electric blue. Some sellers lean into the mystical, advertising their wares as energetically charged or programmed with Reiki. Others take a more artistic approach, like Mexican sculptor Alejandro Guzman, whose skulls incorporate traditional Mesoamerican motifs, but with a twist modern abstraction meets ancient symbolism. Then there are the novelty items: skull-shaped vodka decanters, LED-lit desk ornaments, even silicone baby tethers. The crystal skull has transcended its origins, becoming less an artifact and more a blank slate for whatever meaning we project onto it. This boom isn't just commercial, it's cultural. Every new replica, no matter how kitschy, adds another layer to the mythos. Social media fuels the fire, with influencers posing alongside skulls hashtagged #ancientwisdom or #alientech. Workshops promise to teach SKULL Chinese letter, a pseudo-ritual where participants awaken their replicas through meditation. The irony is rich. Objects likely born from 19th century deception are now revered as tools for enlightenment, their backstories rewritten to fit contemporary spirituality. And the more these modern versions proliferate, the harder it becomes to separate fact from fiction, history from hype. For archaeologists, this presents a unique challenge. When every gift shop sells Mayan crystal skulls, how do you convince the public that the originals might be fakes? Museums find themselves fighting an uphill battle against misinformation. Their carefully researched exhibits competing with viral TikToks of people communing with mass-produced replicas. Even scientific testing struggles to keep up. With so many new skulls flooding the market, forgers have grown more sophisticated, using aged-looking materials or antiquing techniques to mimic wear. Some even mix modern quartz with fragments of genuinely old artifacts, creating hybrids that blur the line between replica and fraud. Yet amid the commercial frenzy, a quieter movement has emerged. Indigenous artists across Mexico and Guatemala are reclaiming the narrative, crafting skulls that challenge colonial stereotypes. Oaxacan carvers like Tomás Ramirez use local quartz to create pieces that parody the New Age market skulls with tongue-in-cheek engravings like "Made in Atlantis" or "Powered by Wi-Fi." These works aren't just satire, they're acts of resistance, reclaiming a symbol that's been hijacked by outsiders. Meanwhile, Maya-led cooperatives sell ethically sourced replicas alongside pamphlets debunking the myths, turning each sale into a teachable moment. The most fascinating twist: some modern artisans are achieving what the original forgers only pretended to do. Using traditional tools like obsidian chisels and sand abrasives, they're creating skulls that genuinely mirror pre-Columbian techniques, not to deceive but to revive lost skills. The results are striking, asymmetrical, stylized, and worlds away from the machine-perfect specimens of the 19th century. In a way, these carvers are doing what Eugène Boban never could, honoring Mesoamerican traditions without exploiting them. The crystal skull's journey from dubious artifact to spiritual commodity to cultural flashpoint reveals something unexpected about how legends evolve. They don't just fade when exposed as fakes, they mutate, finding new life in the gaps between what we know and what we wish were true. The replicas aren't just keeping the myth alive, they're rewriting it in real time, proving that sometimes the most enduring mysteries aren't about the past at all. They're about us. Humanity has always been drawn to objects that whisper of secrets just beyond our grasp, and the crystal skulls are the perfect storm of mystery, artistry, and unanswered questions. There's something primal in the way they capture our imagination, a blend of beauty and unease that taps into our deepest fascinations. Think about it, these aren't just carved stones. They're human faces frozen in quartz, staring back at us with hollow eyes that seem to hold centuries of untold stories. That duality, familiar yet alien, tangible yet inexplicable, hooks us on a level deeper than logic. They're the ultimate Rorschach test, reflecting back whatever we project onto them. Ancient wisdom, alien technology, or even our own longing for a past more magical than the one we've inherited. Part of their power lies in the way they straddle the line between art and artifact. Unlike a broken pot or a rusted sword, the skulls feel intentionally crafted to unsettle and awe. Their flawless surfaces suggest mastery beyond their time, sparking debates that pit mainstream archaeology against rogue theorists. And in an era where science has demystified so much of the world, they offer a rare gift, the thrill of not knowing. We're bombarded with answers every day: search engines, documentaries, expert analyzers, yet here's a puzzle that resists easy resolution. That tension between what we can prove and what we feel is irresistible. It's the same pull that draws us to ghost stories around a campfire or conspiracy theories in late-night chats. The skulls don't just allow for speculation, they demand it. Then there's the romance of lost civilizations, a trope as old as storytelling itself. From Atlantis to El Dorado, we're wired to fantasize about cultures grander and more enigmatic than our own. The skulls slot neatly into that narrative, offering a physical relic for our collective what if. Their alleged ties to the Maya and Aztec only deepen the allure. These were peoples who built pyramids aligned with stars, who charted time in cycles spanning millennia. If anyone could have created something so inexplicable, surely it was them. Never mind that the archaeological record disagrees. The idea of a connection is intoxicating. It lets us glimpse a world where history isn't just dates and dust, but a living, pulsing mystery. But perhaps the most fascinating layer is how the skulls expose our relationship with truth itself. In an age of deepfakes and curated realities, their story feels uncomfortably modern. They're relics of an earlier era of misinformation, where colonial greed and exoticism birthed elaborate fakes, yet today they've been resurrected as spiritual talismans. That transformation says less about the skulls and more about us. We don't just want artifacts, we want mirrors that show us the past as we wish it to be. And in that sense, the skulls are uniquely suited to our times. They're not ancient, they're not alien. They're something far more revealing, a testament to the stories we'll cling to when the truth feels too ordinary. So why do they endure? Because they're more than objects. They're vessels for our wonder, our skepticism, and our hunger for a world where magic might still linger in the corners. They challenge us to ask not just what are they, but why do we need them to be extraordinary? The answer to that question might be the greatest mystery of all. After centuries of debate, scientific scrutiny has peeled back the layers of the crystal skull enigma to reveal a far simpler truth. these mesmerizing objects are almost certainly products of 19th century ingenuity rather than ancient hands. The evidence is overwhelming. Microscopic tool marks betraying industrial-era equipment, quartz deposits tracing back to mines far from Mesoamerica, and historical records exposing the elaborate forgery networks of dealers like Eugène Boban. Even attempts to recreate the skulls using genuine pre-Columbian techniques result in crude, asymmetrical carvings, nothing close to the eerie perfection of specimens like the Mitchell-Hedges skull. At this point, the archaeological consensus is clear. These aren't relics of Atlantis or alien gifts. They're masterpieces of deception, born from a golden age of artifact fraud when demand for the exotic outpaced ethical scholarship. Yet here's the paradox: the more science demystifies the skulls, the more their legend grows. Why does an open and shut case of forgery still captivate millions? Because the skulls tap into something deeper than facts. They represent the romance of the unsolved, the thrill of confronting an object that seems to defy logic. Think about it, even knowing they're likely fakes, there's still a visceral jolt when you lock eyes with one. That flawless quartz surface, those hollow sockets that seem to stare right through you, they trigger a primal response that no lab report can fully erase. The skulls thrive in the limbo between certainty and wonder, proving that some mysteries aren't about answers, but about the questions we refuse to stop asking. Consider how they've permeated pop culture. Indiana Jones didn't chase a stamped certificate of authenticity, he chased the adrenaline of the unknown. The skulls work the same way. Their power lies not in what they are, but in what they represent, humanity's endless hunger for stories that transcend the mundane. In an age of algorithms and explainer videos, they offer a rare gift: the permission to marvel. That's why New Age shops still sell replicas, why documentaries still debate their energies, and why museums display them with labels that say, "likely fabricated," while crowds press closer, hoping to feel a tingle of something inexplicable. So does knowing their true origins make them any less fascinating? Look at it this way: the greatest trick the skulls ever pulled wasn't convincing us they were ancient. It was revealing how badly we need mysteries to remain unsolved. They challenge us to sit with discomfort, to embrace the idea that some objects are valuable not for their provenance, but for the conversations they spark, the creativity they ignite, and the cracks they expose in our need for neat conclusions. The real magic of the crystal skulls was never in their quartz. It's in their reflection of us, the storytellers, the skeptics, and the believers, all still searching for that glint of something extraordinary in their depths. After all, isn't the most compelling mystery of all the human capacity to keep wondering, even when the facts say otherwise? So what do you think? Are the crystal skulls ancient relics, elaborate hoaxes, or something even stranger? Drop your wildest theories in the comments below. We've heard everything from interdimensional portals to CIA experiments, and we can't wait to dive into your ideas. If you're itching to dig deeper, archaeologist Jane McLaren Walsh's groundbreaking research is a must-read. She's the forensic detective who exposed many of these skulls as 19th century fabrications, and her work reads like a real-life Indiana Jones mystery. And hey, if you're hooked on historical enigmas like this, don't forget to hit subscribe. Up next, we're cracking open another artifact that's had historians scratching their heads for centuries: the eerie, clockwork precision of the Antikythera mechanism. Dubbed the world's oldest computer, this ancient Greek device shouldn't exist, yet there it is, defying time and rewriting what we thought we knew about ancient technology. Want to unravel the secrets of a 2,000-year-old machine? Hit that notification bell and we'll see you in the next adventure. Until then, keep questioning, keep wondering, and never stop chasing the